Really, most of the work that's been going on um, has been around the kind of working on the equitable engagement aspect of this project. So Laura and Brendel and our new climate justice workers have been really spending a lot of time developing what the framework is for those engagement activities. So, one of the things that uh, the climate justice workers that we have, I think we announced at the last meeting, but Jelly Duckworth and Justice Horn, they're really focusing on, how do we make the community feel like part of this planning process? So they have some very central core themes or protocol in mind about how they're dealing with the community. They want this, human-driven, equity-centered approach. It's all about listening to what they have to say, so that, we can really use what they're telling us to kind of really help focus our planning efforts. So they've already started out in the community. So, they've kind of put together the framework for what they want to do. Each one sort of is focusing on a little bit different things. I think Jelly's role is she's looking at, processes and outcomes, make sure that they're equitable, helping to, of course, align the experiences that we're hearing about with the risk and vulnerability assessment. So it's a lot of work going on there. They've already gone out into the community, been talking to people. So I'm going to try to see if I can share a presentation that we had with the steering committee yesterday. So just kind of show you a couple of slides that will give you a little bit more feel for what things are going on. Give me 1 second here.
So Andy, just out of curiosity, when they go out into communities, how do they find the people to engage with? And do they start with a baseline of, do they have information about the ecological crisis and potential hazards and stuff like that in the future, or are they really going out just to interact with them and see what their current needs are and then potentially project from there?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both of those things. I think we're trying not to prescribe to them too much. I think there's a little bit of, framing of the climate issue, but it's more of a listening session to find out what are the issues that they're having, how, and actually there was a story told by Jelly yesterday that really kind of highlighted that the person she was talking to, who happened to live close to a floodplain, really didn't make the connection necessarily between climate and the issues she was dealing with when her property or her house was being flooded. So there's some of that kind of back and forth, that goes on in that engagement process.
Mm-hmm.
So let me go through some of these slides that maybe help answer some of your questions. These are the slides that they used yesterday. So I'm not fully versed in them, but I thought it'd be helpful to kind of show you guys just what the basic topics were. And, I know, and I'd certainly invite Jerry and my staff to jump in here if anything strikes them. And then, did Michael Kelly make it on today? Are you on?
He's here.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay, so Michael, you are our official liaison to the Climate Protection Steering Committee. So feel free to jump in. I meant to call you and give you a heads up, so I don't mean to put you on the spot either. So, but if I
could interject one thing when you get time.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Ben, just in a direct response, one of the things that we provided to the climate justice workers is a list of contacts in each of the 6 council districts to get them started with finding their own contacts. But at least we gave them names of people who knew lots and lots of other people that they could use as a base.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so this is the engagement team slide here, and you can kind of see, we've got, of course, Brendel, we've got our climate justice workers, and then most recently, we've picked up an intern, Adalia Cabrales. So I think Molly, you know who that is, right?
It's one of our students.
Yep. So they or she just started, I think. So not quite yet involved directly, but looking forward to having her on. So this is kind of, just kind of showing you a little bit of, the various kinds of activities that the team is going to be involved with. So obviously, the main thing that you're going to hear me say a lot about is the Casey Spear Playbook. So that is one of the online platforms that we are kind of directing folks to do online. And I'll show you that here in a second.
Andy, could you go to presentation mode to make it easier to read?
Sure. See what happens.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so this is the engagement team here. Then this one here I thought was a very good slide. This one was put together, I think, with Jelly, kind of trying to set the framework for, what is climate equity and the definition of that. So, how that factors into their engagement process. So I thought that was a nice background and showing what her thinking is, how you're leveraging, the research that we're doing with Mark's vulnerability assessment with the issues that we're identifying with the community. So in terms of who we're engaging, this is basically the list of folks that we're expecting to meet with or talk to. So obviously yesterday was the first time that, and I've already mentioned, we had the Climate Protection Steering Committee yesterday. That was the first time that we have a newly appointed steering committee. And so Michael Kelly, of course, is our representative from the EMC on that. So yesterday was their first opportunity to kind of hear what was going on. The technical advisors will be reaching out to here in the near future in the next phase of this project. Of course, elected and appointed officials. How that plays into it is there is some conversation that we're having where we will be briefing our council members through a business session coming up in September, maybe late September, early October, where we will kind of bring them up to speed on the entire project and where we are. And that's not to say that we're not having other instances where our climate justice workers have not already reached out to specific council members to kind of brief them on the project and get their input. So that's already sort of going on as well. Of course, organizational partners, we'll be reaching out to the large list of folks that we collected names and organizations. A lot of these were identified in the original resolution in 200005, where we identified a wide variety of stakeholders. So we'll be reaching out to them. And then, of course, the public. So it's a wide net that we're casting to try to reach and to make this as an equitable as a process as we can. So one of the things that Justice talked about, of course, is, what are we tracking? So these are kind of some of the metrics or some of the data that we'll be collecting is the number of neighborhoods that we're reaching, the number of meetings in the targeted areas, number of hours of listening, number of narratives. So again, a lot of this data will be used to help facilitate, the next phase of the project in terms of, where we go, what are the strategies, to consider, things of that nature.
Andy, can you explain that last one for me?
Which particular bullet point or what?
Number of narratives, yeah.
So on our platform, I'm going to jump over to the playbook here in just a little bit. But
Sure.
one of the things that we really want to highlight or really want to emphasize are people's stories.
Sure.
So you're going to have an opportunity to basically tell your story. How is climate change affecting you? How are you experiencing it? Or the other thing is it could be also what are some things you've seen in your community that's working? Do you have a sustainability hub or a community shelter or something that seems to work for you? So I think we're looking for all of that types of data to really help our consultant help us kind of develop the strategies moving forward. And I'll show you an example of that here in just a minute.
Sure, thank you.
So, and this was exactly what I was kind of referring to. Right now we're in this phase one, listen and learn. So we're coming, we got through August to do this. I suspect a lot of this stuff will kind of stay active. But if you go to Playbook, kcmo.gov, CRP, you'll have an opportunity to share your story. There's also an opportunity to complete a survey and then a map. So let me see if I can do that for you real quick. Bear with me just a second. Just let me know when you can see it.
It's up.
Okay, thank you. All right, so when you go to the playbook, you should, of course, you can create a free account basically and sign in. But basically, when you go to that link, this is what you'll see. So this is part of the comprehensive plan, where the comprehensive plan is using the playbook as well to capture a lot of the input from the community. And so Laura worked with our comprehensive plan folks and city planning to see if we could kind of use the same platform. And being that the public was already used to this, why not try to use what we have? So we've kind of worked out this deal. So this is what you see. This explains our first phase, listen and learn. And this is where you have an opportunity to share your stories. And so here's where just 8 hours ago, we had somebody in here talking about wasting water. And so you can kind of read through that particular scenario. Another one here, of course, here's Deanne talked about LED streetlights. Another one about someone's an architect talking about carbon neutrality and equity, and 3 suggestions that this person had. So that's just a couple of examples of the stories, and there's just, it hasn't been up real long, but that's one area you can do that in. You can click on the link for survey, and it takes you to a, you complete this survey. I'm not going to click on it now per se, but asking you various things related to your experiences with climate change. But the really interesting thing, I think, is this map. I'm going to get that started here. So the climate issues and opportunities map. This is an opportunity for you, once you create your account, to actually plot. You can put little flags on the map for where there are climate vulnerable issues or actual or opportunities, we'll call them that. It could be flooding, it could be areas where, and you can even, the flags that you can select can also be positive ones. So if you see something that's working, you can drop a pin or a flag on that site. And so the idea is to kind of build out a map of the opportunities that that Brendel can use in their analysis to, again, to help us tailor what the strategies are for the plan, particularly and neighborhood specific. So the map will help us look at what's showing up in specific parts of the community that we need to maybe focus on. So it's kind of a neat aspect of the tool, and we're hoping to get people to try to use this. So right now, I don't see that there's any pins on it. I've been kind of playing with it a little bit, but I'd have to talk to Laura about whether you can see everybody's pins or all you can see are your own pins. It's kind of a question I had, but anyhow, that is essentially the website. And then on the right,
can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me? You can see everyone's pin. Once people put pins up there, you should be able to see the pin they put up, and everybody that puts up a pin has to put an explanation about that pin. And so you'll be able to see their explanation underneath their pin as well if you hover over their pin.
Thank you, Laura. Other things about the website, you can see you also see a little bit where we are in the phases on the right side. So, where we started, we're in the listen and learn phase right now. And then shortly we'll begin to collaborate and explore. And that's basically the collaborate and explore is where we'll really be listening to the community and asking them, what do they think are some solutions to the climate issues that they're dealing with. So it's just kind of, again, gathering specific strategies from their perspective of, what is it that they need. And then it won't be until the next phase after that, the prioritize and align, where we start to really match up the data with all the strategies that were suggested to kind of streamline it and really start to hone in on specific strategies, particularly ones that'll help us match up to the goals that we have in terms of climate neutrality by 2040 in the community and 2030 in city operations. So a lot of moving parts, but that's the overall strategy of how we're going to put this plan together. And then finally, once we get a draft of the plan, of course, we would expect the commission probably to review that along with the Climate Protection Steering Committee. Once the draft is done and approved by the commission and the committee, we would take it to council for them to hopefully adopt. And then from there, after that, then we of course begin implementation. So let me see if I can exit this and get back to my slides. Please forgive me, I've been kind of bouncing around a lot, but I was trying to find a way to kind of cover this material best as I could. Let's see if there's any other slides I want to cover here. Yeah, just this last slide. Nope, I think we're good. Okay. So showed you the playbook. So yeah, I would definitely stress that, as the commission, that we would highly encourage you to get on the playbook, register, fill out the survey, use the map, explain your stories. But besides that, any of your networks, any of your contacts, anything you can do to help promote this site would be greatly appreciated. Again, this is not the only way that we're looking to collect this information. We're using it as a tool. We are, of course, still using our justice workers to be out in the community. There are several opportunities where we will be out in the community. Let me see, I think I had a slide of that. Yeah, so August 16th, there is an 816 day. August 21st through the 22nd is the Ethnic Entertainment Review. You got Pride Fest coming up as well. So we're going to be, it might be a tabling event. It could be where Jelly and Justice are just literally just out within the community or within the event and handing out, we've got like business cards and we've got flyers. So there'll be a little bit of sharing of that, and those business cards and flyers will help direct people to the website where they can actually put down their specific stories or fill out the survey.
Andy, sometimes, I mean, if it's possible, I've done that kind of tabling in the past, and occasionally, like if you have a tablet or some kind of computer with you that can connect to the internet, people can just like type out and fill out the survey right there.
Yeah,
And
that's a good idea.
that might be a way to electrify and streamline the collection.
No, certainly. Yeah, we'll certainly I'll bring that to Laura. We'll talk about that, see if that's an option. Let me see, anything else? Jerry, anything that I missed there in that whole outreach engagement plan? I think the social media side is also going to be happening. I know Laura just sent something to city communications on tweets and Facebook postings, et cetera, et cetera. That's city communications is going to be kind of spearheading that for us. So they've agreed to do that. So you'll start to see little, whatever they are, tweets and things flying out there. So again, trying to really promote this planning process. So that's going on as well. Jerry, was there anything else? Did I get it?
I think that's the highlights of it, sure.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's most of what I wanted to say about the climate planning process. And just to roll that into the steering committee, I sent one of the attachments I forwarded to the EMC, of course, were the new Climate Protection Steering Committee. The mayor appointed 10 folks to the steering committee. There is still one vacancy. Not sure what that's about or what the thinking is on that, but anyhow, we've got 10, and so they met yesterday for their first meeting. Tom Grever is the chair of the committee, and I think I'm interested to hear what Mike has to say about how it went yesterday, but I think it was a great first meeting. It was a lot of information, fast and furious, and it'll be interesting to see how they kind of gel and what they decide how to move forward. So, Mike, did you have any comments you want to throw out there?
Apologies for the EMC commissioner who's having a bad day. I'll just offer really quickly that I think it's a pretty productive first meeting, and I think that everyone's kind of eager to get going on getting the plan updated, adopted, and implemented. So that's kind of our job with the steering committee, and so we're going to do as much as we can to make sure the process is moving forward in an equitable and timely manner.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
And then Andy, I'm sorry, just to go back to the earlier topic for 1 second. In terms of the listening sessions, the groups that we're approaching, does that include schools, universities, high schools, that kind of thing?
I would have to defer to Laura or Jerry on this one. I don't know. I like to say that it is, but I don't remember us talking about that.
Based on my experience, at least, it's very difficult to get into schools, especially high schools, middle schools, because of existing teaching plans that are in place. And some teachers will allow you to break in and some won't. So it's a little bit of a problem. It's a little problematic in that regard, although representatives will be part of the set of institutions that get invited to participate. That might be a little passive, but that's because we're in the process of developing the structure for all of this at this point. So it's not quite ready yet.
Yeah, I mean, it was the thought. I think that the generation that's in high school and universities right now is probably the most engaged generation in terms of this conversation that I've ever seen. It's very intuitive for them. This information is stuff that they've grown up with. A 21-year-old was born in the year 2000 right now, which is terrifying to me.
Not you, but me.
Yeah. And so, I mean, they're going to be the people who are going to be in this transforming and transformed economy the longest. It's a way to listen to them and hear what their fears are and what their excitement might be about what we're trying to do.
Right.
I can add a little bit to that as well. If you guys can still hear me, I never know with the hold or anything.
You're a little choppy, but yeah.
There is a student action committee out of Climate Action KC, and I participate on that committee, and we're going to be meeting next Tuesday to figure out how we can reach out to students and get them more involved, because everything's a little crazy with COVID. So that is in process. It's just in the works.
Perfect.
Yeah, Ben, one of the things that we are just now having the conversation, we've spent a lot of time on the engagement aspect of it. One of the things I've been kind of pressing with Laura and even Jerry and I were talking about is we got to kind of jump ahead a little bit as well. How do we do these stakeholder engagement meetings? How are we going to organize around specific subject matter, whether it's energy or transportation or whatever. So that's still something that we need to work with Brendel to work out that framework more so. It's been an interesting project so far. I know Laura's already, I don't know that interesting would have been the word she'd use, but I've been enjoying the process. So anyhow, I'm looking forward to the next steps.
Laura, who is
Andy?
that?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Marty.
What is that group? Student Action Committee of what?
That was through
It's
Climate
part
Action
of the,
KC.
KC. Matt Riggs is running it out of Mid-America Regional Council.
Okay. Well, I may want to reach out to them too at some point. So how do I do that?
I can send you Matt Riggs' contact information.
I've got it. Thanks. That's all I
Okay.
needed.
Yeah, the
Andy,
last thing.
can you
Well, let me-
speak a little bit to how you're going to brief the council and keep them up to date on this?
Yeah, so first off, like I said, besides emails that I might send to them from time to time, our justice workers as well, I have been kind of touching base with various council members as well. But, this is something that we need to kind of work with our Climate Protection Steering Committee. One of the thoughts that we've had internally is, whether a business session would be appropriate to do that. So again, sometime in September, October might be an opportune time in this project to brief the council. So yeah, again, the steering committee is wanting to meet again in September. So I think we're going to look to try to gather a little bit more direction from the steering committee. But if they're amenable to that, I'm thinking that sometime at the end of September, October might be a good time to brief them on. I would suspect by that time we'll have the inventory, we may have the risk and vulnerability assessment, but also, the regional plan has not been presented to the council yet. So, and I know that those folks would like an opportunity to share that with the council. So, we're trying to marry a way where we can have them possibly present to the council and then follow up that particular presentation with Kansas City specific planning process, and kind of tell them how we're taking it further, being more specific to our community, and then go from there. So, it's just right now still in a formative stage of trying to flesh that out, but that's what I'm thinking right now.
Are we
That's all I
ready
had.
to move? Go ahead. Are we ready to move on to the draft of for the annual report? Did everybody get a copy of that, Andy? Was that sent out?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Marty,
sent
do you
out-
need me to send it to you?
Yeah.
No,
I sent out an email.
I have it. I just wanted to be sure that other people had it. The draft report, Michael, you're on, right? Where are you? Michael?
Sorry, yeah.
That's all right. That's all right. The annual report really focuses mostly on activities that are around the climate issue. But it does call back to the report that you did last year that covered more of the environmental issues that are traditional for the EMC. So we didn't want to lose the fact that we're still supposed to be doing a good job with everything else. And so multiple times in this report, we just refer back to that and then move on with the climate, since climate is the thing that is so imminent right now. But I want you to know that we haven't lost what you did before, and we are referencing it. And I don't know if we will need to provide a link to it perhaps as an attachment, not the whole thing as an attachment, but at least a link so that any council staffers that pursue it can find all that information. With that having been said, the report is similar to what it was when you saw it last month. We added a little more language about the urgency. We have emphasized the importance of the planning process, which is why I was asking Andy about how he was going to interface with the council to be sure that they understood how critical this is. It refers to the regeneration of soil health and natural cycles, which is what Bob and Marty and others have been working on. That really hasn't been changed from what you saw last month. the language from Julie has all been added in here, and it kind of follows on the language that came from Marty and Bob's initiative, so that it connects it back to the community. I think that that's a vital communication. A lot of the rest of the technical information is the information that came from Scott. And again, that has not been greatly changed from what you saw last month. And the conclusion has been added. And so the conclusion actually, again, emphasizes the urgency and makes a single recommendation. And the single recommendation was full engagement of elected officials, staff, and citizens in the examination of how to regenerate a constructive ecology in Kansas City. And so this is hopefully sort of a call to action, but also a window to the council of some of the many different kinds of things that are going on. Some of the language that is on the under the topic of the regeneration of soil health and restoration of natural cycles is really very helpful. It was provided largely by David Dodds, and he has a broad and inclusive view of what kind of changes need to happen and sort of the relationship between humans and the world we live in. So it is here for your consideration and discussion and addition and correction, but that's what it is.
Carol, this is Julie. Can you hear me?
I can, Julie. Oh, Julie, we should say something else too. All your examples are included as an appendix, but go ahead. But what we did with the appendix is we put Austin first, because Austin has some things that are not as revenue intensive. And so we wanted to not have all revenue intensive suggestions right up front and then at the very end say, and you can do other things. We wanted to give the council a flavor for what could be done, whether or not they felt revenue rich.
Well, I saw that. I didn't know what the thinking was behind it, but Austin obviously is a great example of all kinds of really cool things. The one thing that I wanted to say is, okay, so, once you get started on stuff like this, it's hard to turn your brain off. So I have another one, and I actually stuck it in here, but, it could be put anywhere. But this is an interesting one out of Pinellas County, Florida, and it doesn't cost any money. It's an ordinance. It's a county ordinance on fertilizer. And to protect the watershed, all property owners are forbidden from purchasing. So like the stores can't sell fertilizer or apply fertilizer containing nitrogen and phosphorus between July 1st and September 30th, which is their rainy season. And then if the National Weather Service issues like a severe thunderstorm or hurricane warning or even any kind of storm, you can't put down any fertilizer for a 24-hour period. So to me, it's an interesting, it doesn't cost anything. Of course, there would be backlash from all the lawn services, but it's their way of saying our water is very important and that fertilizer goes in during our rainy time. Our rainy time is not the same time as their time. But anyway, I just thought it was an interesting way to protect the land and the water from overuse of fertilizer.
Julie, you said that was in Florida?
I just put the link up.
It's Pinellas County, Florida. And they also, and while I was on that site, of course, they also have got this landscape incentive program where they'll pay a 50% rebate up to $2,000 if you replace any of your irrigation system with like water conserving plants instead. So, they're trying to incentivize what they want, which is to stop, polluting the water and the soil. So I have little summaries of these. I don't know whether we want to include them or not. And, you know, I'm sure if I just kept looking, I'd find more. And I'm really glad you put that in the index because you know, but it also says to the city council, this is happening in lots of other places. Other cities are paying attention, and we should too. So anyway.
Julie, you just provided me with a bright spot in the state of Florida, and I didn't think that I would ever see that again.
Okay, so Pinellas County is kind of a more progressive area. It's the county. It's that peninsula that's just west of Tampa, and yeah, there's some kind of cool things going on in there. I mean, yeah. So anyway, but yes, it's always good to see something nice coming from Florida.
Would you send that to me and we'll add it?
Yeah. Do you want me to?
Okay.
You want me to send it inserted in here, or I'll just send it to you and you can put it wherever you want it. How about that?
That's fine either way. Actually, it's fine, Julie.
Okay.
Whatever's
Well,
easiest for you.
In the chat.
I'm gonna copy and send it to you. Okay. All right. That's the only addition that I had on my end.
I had a couple of small things. On the last sentence of the energy section, we used dollar signs. We were probably going to fix that anyway, but it should probably just be the word money. And then the same phrase is repeated twice in the report. We talk about young people, brain power, and vigor. And that's used both in the energy section and the lifestyle and community section. So we might want to replace one of those two.
I know that you changed the conclusions and they're wonderful. In light of the report, is there any way to make it even stronger? In the urgency department?
I don't really know exactly what to do in regard to that, which is why I wanted to ask Andy a little bit about how they were planning to relate to the council as regards the climate protection planning process, the resiliency process. I mean, it just seems like you would have to be unconscious to not get that it's urgent at this point. It's on the news every night. But if you have some specific language that you think would be helpful, please send it on. It's just, this is where we got so far. That's one of the reasons, though, that this whole report shies away from the longer list of things that we worry about and focuses so exclusively on the climate issues. And it also, what we're trying to do with this report and some of the information from Scott and from Bob and Marty and their and you, Molly, about the soils and all, is to give council the flavor that it is not simply light bulbs or clean energy or, you know, one thing. And David Dodds did such a good job of articulating how systems linked this whole thing is. But I thought he did it in a way that was not our lingo, but was more generally understood language and would maybe be helpful to the council. And we sort of want this report to go to council, but we also want council staff to pick up on these things that are happening so that they start following it and they start becoming advisors to their council members about opportunities that are available. The thing about fertilizer is interesting, and the pushback from lawn and garden enterprises, because lawn and garden enterprises could make money on Johnson Sioux
You betcha.
just as easy as they could make money on fertilizer, and it'd be a lot better for the community. So it isn't anti one business. It's just an alternate view of opportunity, right, Marty?
That's the way I look at it.
Here, here.
All right,
Yeah.
that's great stuff, Carol.
You know, you really don't need fertilizer. The prairie didn't need fertilizer to get to be built, and the forest didn't need it.
But you could
Carol?
always use a nice lawn care guy to come spread your Johnson Sue every
Oh, yeah.
year, right?
Yeah, I would love to have the lawn care people create their own Johnson Sues in their backyard or wherever they do that, and then use their own material, and that would save them a bunch of money.
Yeah. Anyway, go
Carol?
ahead. Yes. I
Carol,
don't
is
know
there
who's-
anything in the
Huh?
conclusion? I'm suggesting that maybe there be a reference in the conclusion to the urgency perceived in meeting, addressing and meeting the current resolution 200005, the targets that council itself has set for us, and maybe put it in, make that part of the context so that it might be received on a different level as well.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So, make a reference in the conclusion to the fact that they've already started to do some of these, to address some of these issues. I don't know how to say it exactly, but maybe you could send me some language about how to phrase that. Where are we on that as far as what is your concern? Are you saying you're concerned that we keep our foot on the pedal, or
Absolutely. I think it's another way to emphasize the urgency. It's
Okay.
not just the science, it's not just IPCC, it's the city council's own resolution.
okay?
I guess to me, it kind of connects the dots to, when that resolution was passed, and there may have been different people involved at that time.
Right,
different people on
right.
council. So yeah, I think that's an excellent idea, Jerry. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah.
Would you help me
me
with
too.
some
Trying to close
language?
the circle.
Yeah, would you help me with some language for that, Jerry?
Sure.
Okay.
So I guess one other passing thought that I had for the intro is it potentially worth mentioning the report that just came out as well?
I think we can mention it if we want to. And I don't mind doing that at all. And we can do that in the second paragraph if we want to, or we could even, I don't know. We could provide a link to the report, but I don't know that they would read it. But
No.
we could provide. We could say something about as we could reference a report in that second paragraph.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect people to read it. There's there's oodles of
Well,
reports.
surely they're
Since
seeing.
it's breaking news, that's
Yeah.
maybe it helps.
Yeah,
set
surely
the
they're
stage.
seeing that, but we can certainly reference it.
You can link to the summary, decision maker summary. Which is
Okay.
more digestible version than the entire report.
One of the things that I
Do you have that link, Molly?
Yep.
Okay, if you would send that to me so that I can include it.
so it was the report was definitely dire, but I think that the overall message was that it was maybe unintentionally and probably intentionally meant to be activating. The message that I got from it was that all hope is not lost, and this is the time. This is our opportunity. So I would recommend that if we talk about it in the intro, we make it very clear, like, if you're reading this, you're the person. Like you are the people that are going to have to be activated. Like, this is something that is your responsibility. It's my responsibility. And the other thing that the report said is that while there's a time frame to do this, it gets more and more difficult to accomplish after every single passing day. That work, it doesn't happen, that people don't become activated, that nothing changes. So, you know, I think that if we're going to use a reference to the report, it has to be very personal.
Is there, in the lifestyle and community changes, is there a communication piece?
Well, actually, we relied more on, as far as, you know, how we've talked about communication over and over and over. We relied more on the language from Julie for that, talking about how you need to have, we called it engage residents in every back and front yard. That was Julie's.
That was awesome.
And we really talk about it there, and it goes into listing some of the active organizations. Sorry, my phone is reminding me of things. It references some of the community organizations that are also involved in the same kind of thing. But I thought that the way Julie put it in context was particularly effective. Instead of just saying we should do better, this was a very specific way to do better, I thought.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway,
I think the report's really wonderful. My comment about that and Ben's letter of emergency is, it needs to be even more so, and maybe we just deliver them on fire. I don't know.
Molly, I literally put all caps in there.
No, I think I'm just having a down day about all of this. I'm not.
I hear you.
Okay, are you all comfortable with editing this up and moving it forward?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's really
Okay.
wonderful. And
so we have several different notes, and we will edit it up and move it forward.
And Carol, thanks for all the work and the coordination and all of you that contributed. It was, you know, as I look back, it was a really nice collaborative effort.
Right. And again, I think that we need to thank back to Michael for doing what he did last year that covered so many of the other topics. I have a hand up here. It's just initials. Whose hand do I have? Hillary?
Yeah.
Yes, hi, that's me. Is there some way to take a look at this? I don't know when it's going to be available, but I'm doing some of the things you're talking about.
Sure.
And so I'm interested in seeing what this says.
Sure. We can send it to you. Just put in the chat how you want to receive it.
Okay, it's telling me that the chat is muted, but can I go ahead and put something in there and you'll see it?
Actually, I think so. Rachel is our great guru of keeping track of the chat. See if she can
try it
type
out,
a message.
Okay, I just put my email in there.
Yes, I can see it and I can get it to the group.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Are we ready to move forward? Everybody okay with the, oh, wait, Gloria, is your hand up? No, okay.
Oh, Gloria's muted. If you,
I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
It's just gonna take a minute. I gotta figure out how to unmute and do it quickly and make it stay. Thank you.
Okay, I'm ready to move forward.
Go for it.
Ben, do you want to talk about your letter?
Sure. So I think that we've all been saying it for pretty much this entire meeting that you would have to be totally blind not to see the flashing red warning signal that's happening all over California, Portland, Seattle, heat waves up there, you know, billions of sea creatures dying in a period of a week or two. And so I wrote this letter to submit to the commission to send to the council. And I appreciate, was it you who put together the letters of emergency, or the emergency declarations from Chicago and from Iowa City?
Yeah, we had staff, Jerry pulled several for me to look at, and those were just a couple that I thought you guys could look at as an example, but there's
It's
lots of
great.
them out there.
It's great. Yeah, I mean, the Chicago one was a real banger. The Iowa City one was a little bit more lukewarm, but the Chicago one, I felt like every whereas kind of hammered home more of the context of what we're dealing with. And then in the Be It Resolved section, really got into specific actions that the city would take in order to respond to the crisis. So, I kind of did a similar thing. At the beginning of the letter, I talk about the context of the emergency that we're facing, and the fact that previous lists haven't targeted the sources of our ecological emergency adequately, both cultural, economic, and institutional, or all three of those things, really. And then from there, I go into why we need an emergency declaration, which should be obvious because there actually is an emergency, and then ways to bring the community together. So I stipulated like 5 ways that we could have meetings to talk about it in the city council districts, and then regionally and statewide. So yeah, does anybody have any kind of input, any additions to either the beginning section where I talk about the context of our ecological emergency, the middle section where I talk about the necessity of action right now, or suggestions for how to kind of circle the wagons, so to speak, to use a colonial term for something that's, if anything, decolonizing?
Grief groups come to mind.
I'm sorry, Marty, what did you say?
Grief. Dealing with grief over the loss of our planet.
Not yet.
I was in a group that really got into that, and out of that comes power. What's her name? Macy. Joanna Macy has made that point, that if you really touch this thing the way it is, I mean, we're not having forest fires right now, but some of us can look at the forest fires and have enough empathy or sympathy or whatever that is to resonate with it deeply. And so we have to touch what we're facing. We have to really touch it. And they're having grief counselors over shootings and stuff.
Sure.
I'm not, just put that in the back burner. I'm not saying I want to do that tomorrow but it just flashed while we were talking.
Well, no, Marty, what I like about that suggestion so much is that, one, it is a way for people to collectively engage in an incredibly traumatic experience that we're all having.
Well, I think that the non-action is part of the trauma, or part,
of course,
of
course,
trauma
but action
reaction.
in the wrong direction, or
I don't want to
in
touch
the wrong way is not necessarily the best thing ever, as well. But what I was going to say is that grief groups, it's going to be difficult to add pressure to people to look into something that's so terrifying without having them turn away or shut off from it.
Well,
but if you can invite them to engage collectively in that grief, and then kind of transform that into consensus and action, then I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, the point is just to get them together and to start discussing this.
Yeah.
And what they're seeing on TV the fires and the floods and all that, that's going to come belching out because it's not hidden to them. They're trying to hide it, but it's too powerful.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yep. That's great. So
let me interject for a minute. Andy, where are you?
Right
Andy?
here, right here. Yeah, go ahead.
Good. I thought the idea of recommending a resolution was an idea that might be actionable by the council. I'll tell you candidly, my concern about this letter is not that we're saying that there's an emergency, but that we're saying it in a way that is blame casting and in a way that's not helpful. I think it needs to be an entirely actionable and sort of a letter that expresses concern in a way that is urgent and vital, but it doesn't do any good to go through how we got here. People know how we got here. We could talk about what we need to do different in the future, but some of that's not on the council, and they don't really need to. It doesn't need to be on the council, and I don't see that.
I don't agree. So Carol, I don't place blame on the council in any part of the letter. I talk about activists and scientists, and I've been an activist and a community organizer based off of the environment and our ecological crisis since I was in high school and college, my entire life. And I paint myself with that same brush as someone who didn't understand the roots of what's happening in our natural world. And part of that is just not understanding that I was not raised in a culture to see it in the first place. You cannot see the fact that you don't have a real connection to nature without having lost that connection in the first place. I wasn't raised with it. So I'm not seeing what you're seeing here, where I don't see where I'm blaming the council for anything.
I'm not saying that you're blaming the council. I'm saying that talking about how some of these actions will not be well received and how the fossil fuel industry has led us astray and all of that is not necessarily the same as calling on the council to pass a resolution that says this is an emergency and that we ought to be vitally concerned, and references how bad it is and how urgent it is, and then gives them a resolution as something that they can take action on. And that resolution then becomes public. It can be shared with their associations with other communities in context, but it becomes something that we're asking them to do instead of asking them to do all of these other things. Ask them to pass a resolution that speaks to these other things. Does that make sense?
Pass a resolution that speaks to the district meetings and the other communications.
Right. It's a form of communication. I think that what we want them to do in terms of district meetings and other things like that is we want them to engage in the process that they've paid for to get action in our community to respond to the climate crisis. So we want them to acknowledge that there's a crisis. We don't want a different process than the regional process that already exists or than the planning process that is currently underway. We want a plug-in wholeheartedly to those things so that as a community, we're moving someplace. We're not Kansas City saying, you all should do it our way. This is our concern. Instead, we're plugging in to all of the activities that we're already funding or have already been funded and underway in the community to build a stronger movement from where we currently are instead of starting over. Does that make sense?
I don't understand what you're saying in as much as, are you saying that we should be asking for a resolution to continue doing what we're doing and not declaring a climate emergency? I'm not really following, Carol.
I think that we can say it is a climate emergency, which is why we need to be more actively and fully engaged in what is currently going on, so that we do come up with ideas and solutions. Not, do you understand what I'm saying? Yes, it's an emergency.
I do, and I respectfully disagree. So, Carol, I
Let's
absolutely understand what you're saying, but we have accelerating problems that is going to require accelerated communications and actions. And it's going to require a pivot. It's going to require people actually changing their behavior and how they engage with each other in society. It's going to require people get uncomfortable. Ask someone from a marginalized group or the LGBTQ plus community, or any minority, if they've ever had to be uncomfortable in their entire life, and they're going to tell you every day, absolutely, I have to adapt. I have to change my behavior and my lifestyle so that I can get by in the world. The difference is that with this ask, we're saying that by doing these things and by changing our behavior, there's going to be a significant portion of our communities that have never experienced what it's like to be in a marginalized group, to have to be uncomfortable and sit with the reality of what our culture and what our society has produced with the way that we live and with our ecological reality, and that we need to do it anyway. This is not the time to shy away from bold action. It is literally what's required. So that is why I wrote this draft letter in the first place. And I can take, if you like, I can absolutely take out the piece about the fossil fuel industry obfuscating data and hiring, pawn scientists to make it seem like there was much more wishy-washy information about that stuff. But I don't think that is an accurate reflection of what we're facing. So, we can say, like, if you would like to say, we recommend, we ask, we demand, I'm not saying that we should say we demand, but I do use all caps in the letter, that you declare a state of climate emergency here with a resolution that details, grief groups and citywide district meetings to bring people up to date about the latest science and what we're doing as a society and our opportunities as a community, both within our power and regionally, that can get us to a place of safety so that those emotional reactions can start happening. Because unless you start working with people, unless you open up that Pandora's box of people reacting, then you can't do anything.
Okay, so Ben, if I understand the ask here is you're looking for a resolution. You pretty much want to see what other cities are doing around the country in terms of declaring a climate emergency. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. And on top of that, I was looking at the letter before this meeting and reading over it, and if anything, like, I felt like it was unnecessarily emo, like unnecessarily emotional, because I'm
Right.
like, who is not feeling this right now? Do I really
Sure.
need to put all caps in this? Is this not on the tip of everybody's tongue?
Right, right. So, I mean, just from where I'm coming from, I just want to make sure if we're going to do something like that, is, the timing, or how do we fit that into the other activities going on? So we have the Climate Protection Steering Committee,
Mm-hmm.
that they're looking to put together an agenda. Is that something that, I think you need a draft resolution first of all. So you have a letter, and I would say the letter probably does need to be tweaked in the language, um,
Mm-hmm.
for your ask. The ask
Right.
would be the resolution, in which case my suggestion would be somebody should draft what that resolution should look like. So we could take that to council for them to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Does that happen through the EMC? Does it happen with the Climate Protection Steering Committee? Does it happen jointly with maybe various members from both working on something like that? And then the other thing I would consider is, what's the timing of that? Do we merge that with possibly the business session that we might be planning to do at the end of September or October, where we have the regional folks do the regional plan. We talk about the city's specific planning process. Oh, and why not? Here's an opportunity for you to, not only declare a climate emergency, but you can lend our support to the regional plan as well as continued efforts on the city plan. I mean, is there a way we can fold everything into one? Would that be sufficient? Or would you be open for that as a suggestion? Or is this climate emergency something that you feel should stand alone on its own? In which case, the timing of that, and we're just talking here. I don't have answers, but,
Of course.
do we do that too close to other activities that we're doing as part of our planning process, such that, council is getting hit with so many different issues all the time?
Right.
And I don't want to dilute the message either, so
Mm-hmm.
what's the best strategy? So those are just some thoughts I have.
Sure.
Sure. So to see if that helps any, with some type of strategy here.
So Ben, I'd like to add to that if I may, because I'd love your reaction to this. As you and Carol were exchanging your thinking, what I was thinking is more like what Andy just shared. One of my concerns is, you mentioned how emotive this was and should it be or not. My feeling is that the council hears a lot of emotional stuff all the time, and rightfully so. People are emotional about things that are really hurting them, and they hear a lot of that. And this falls in the same category. It's hurting everyone universally, globally. But I'm not convinced at this point. To be candid, I was reminded of a resolution I took to the National AIA convention in 1989, and it was about climate, and we named it Critical Planet Rescue, CPR.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look
Mm-hmm.
back on it, if I could have found it, I would have sent it to you, because it has a lot in common with what you just written. But on reflection, I'm not sure that's the right move right now. And the reason I've hesitated is I can't say that I'm sitting here with a clear idea of the smart next move. But I do feel like there's a little conflict I'm trying to put myself in the minds of the mayor and council.
Mm-hmm.
And they're getting a lot of stuff thrown at them right now. And we have contributed that ourselves for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure this resolution actually motivates them or stimulates some specific action.
Mm-hmm.
It lets them get clear about where we are, and we feel passionate about this, but I don't think it leads them to a smart next move. And we do have, we're submitting our annual report, which does cite some actions. The Climate Action Committee is going to do their next version of the next important action. And
Right.
it feels like this, if we do this as a standalone, it creates unnecessary background noise. I guess that's part of what I'm feeling. And I wonder, is there another way
So-
underscore that we share
Right.
the sense of urgency that's now been further clarified by IPCC, and that we number one, want their full support of what we've already submitted and what we are now submitting as is climate action. But we want to work with them to accelerate the city's positive action in creating a different future.
So,
something like that.
Bob, this is a letter of acknowledging reality. This is not a letter asking them to turn the world upside down in a single day. It's not asking them to pass a resolution that's going to transform our highway systems and revegetate and put green roofs on all the buildings and stuff like that.
Okay.
This
okay,
is a
I get your
letter.
point.
This
So
is
what-
a
so
letter
if-
to get them thinking about acknowledging, because we can do this Brendel study and we can create climate action plans and we can do all that kind of stuff. But as Molly said in her chat, which Molly, if you want to jump in here and talk vocally here too, we live in a bubble. Like I come across varying types of people. People like in this group here and the guests to this EMC meeting who have just can't believe that people are not like plugged into what's happening, and surely they're going to start taking action soon, and everything's going to be fine. Then there are the people who understand that 60% that was cited in the Yale survey that are like moderately concerned about climate change. Hopefully it's a much higher percentage now. And then there's 40% of people that do not give a crap about any of this stuff. And this letter is emotional because it is the most emotional thing that is happening to everyone on this planet right now. And the resolution that I would be happy to work with council people, including councilperson Melissa Robinson, Eric Bunch, any number of council people that are environmental champions, to champion also a declaration of emergency. What I'm asking this Environmental Management Commission right now to do is to help me sign this letter requesting that they do that. If we want to talk about specific recommendations for the resolution, we can tweak, district meetings, we can add electronic communications, we can add a certain level of marketing or outreach so that people have an understanding of an emergency declaration having been passed and why, the ecological crisis is what we're all doing. Like if you had an actual emergency, if there was a flood that was going to hit the city, people wouldn't, the emergency declaration would be an after the fact, like the water's there, it's coming. Like you would have a physical thing. This is different. And it has to be approached in a different way. So in terms of what Andy said, in terms of what you're saying, Bob, I absolutely understand that. I can get rid of the all caps. That was a little bit hyperbolic in there. I'm happy to do that. And I don't think it's necessary considering that half of California is on fire right now. I think that the wildfires all across the West are probably all caps enough. We don't have to add that in the actual letter itself. But I would be devastated if we didn't agree to send this letter. I'm just going to tell you from my own personal perspective, it is bananas to me that we wouldn't request that the city council start the process of telling people that there's a fire in the theater. Please very calmly stand up, step into the aisle, and we're all going to start moving towards safety. Because right now, I don't see any communication to that effect. And the time to do it is right now.
And so I guess I'm still trying to get to the core of your goal here. And I gather that part of it is to get the council to individually identify themselves as acknowledging that this is an emergency. Is that correct?
yes, to themselves, but also to the people that are going to have to engage in the process of transforming everything that we do. I mean, like the transformative changes that we're going to have to do. Like it's one thing to do a study and create a plan to do something that says, you know, in 2022 or 2023, we need to have this many energy efficient buildings. We need to have public transportation that's taking on this much population. And we need to have this much revegetation and this many trees planted by 2025 or 2026. You can do that all you want, but unless people are prepared to receive communications about it and to make those kinds of emotional work happen and those personal internal changes, you're going to get a huge blowback. I mean, one of the reasons that COVID hit people so hard was that it happened just like that. You know, people didn't have time in advance. If we had been told, if the Trump administration hadn't been the Trump administration, we were told 6 months in advance that, you know, by the way, there's this pandemic. It could come over here. We're creating plans in order to do this stuff. It's the fact that things were constantly changing and very, very abrupt that we got the fiasco that has been the past year. So yes, Bob, to answer your question, the reason that I would like to send this letter and the goal of the letter is to request that they create a resolution that declares a state of climate emergency, and to work with City Council in that resolution to create meaningful outreach to stakeholders all over the city, the region, and the state, and perhaps the nation and the world, that we're in this and that we need to engage. And these are the problems, these are the solutions. If you have resources, if you want to get to work, if you want to provide resources so that we can do this, this is how to engage in the process.
Ben, et al, or everybody, you remind me of me over and over again for the last 20 or 30 years on this commission. Every once in a while I go on a rant and I tell you, I say, you realize how critical this is. And then the machinery of the city has to go so slow. And so that's why I'm out building the very thing I want people to do. It's an action. And I agree with you. Somehow we have to touch the passion button in people in a way that they can respond, but we can't freak them out. And we can't. I mean, you can't throw the cities. I don't know what the hell to do, honestly, because I've tried over and over again. And first time I've gotten any traction is this time. I mean, I think, you know, I mean, I think I've jarred people from time to time. I don't try to jar people. I just come from the same passion I hear in you, and I really like it.
Because it reminds you of you, Marty.
Well, maybe so, but it's the truth. I mean, we are facing a death. We're facing the death of humanity.
Well,
nothing fucking less.
Yeah, right.
And
so yeah.
And
okay, so we know that. I guess the question I'm trying to deal with is
how to do it.
If we say that, let's say we just have a one sentence statement, and that's it, Marty, and we give it to the council. What is the outcome? You know what? I'm still trying to figure out how we motivate the same sense of urgency that we're all feeling. And at this point, I'm not convinced that convincing them and lobbying for a resolution is the path, but maybe it is. I mean, it's your all decision. I mean, it's our decision. So I'm
and just
to hear other thoughts.
Right. And just a caution, some things that you said, Ben, sounded like dollars to me. You know, when you're talking about outreach, to work with the community, to, you know, all that, I'm thinking that's staff time, that's dollars that we're going to need And the caution I would have for you is Councilwoman Shields made it very clear, and I won't forget it, during the adoption of the Urban Forest Master Plan, that we often as a city, particularly council, specifically council, will approve these resolutions, but will not appropriate funds to that resolution. So we have an urban forest master plan that does not have dollars attached to it. So if you go to them with a resolution that says anything more than declaring a climate emergency, where you have specific tasks associated with it, I hope you are asking for the council people to give us the money to do it, because I have no money.
Right.
That's my request.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can start with a letter requesting that they declare a climate emergency, and then we can work out the actual language of a resolution after the fact. But I don't think that we have any time to lose about this. And I think that declaring a climate emergency, which Chicago did in 2020 and Iowa City did in 2019, it's 2021. I mean, like, if we want to be a leader in this conversation, it can't be until 2029. Like, we have to start getting people to click in.
Right.
I think that there are some strong advocates for the environment on the city council, but this isn't marginal information. This is something that everybody needs to have.
Well, another thing, Ben, is that, I think with our climate justice workers just now out talking in the community, I would recommend that maybe you sit down with Jelly and Justice to hear what they're hearing, to get some of that boots on the ground information that they're hearing. They did share some of that yesterday, and I didn't do a particularly robust way of talking about that today, but that may be useful information to you as well, to hear what the community is saying about climate change in their neighborhoods. So just to address that concern a little bit, and maybe they have ideas on what to put into that resolution, whatever that might be.
Right. I don't see this as combative or negative towards any of the work that we're doing or any of the work. If I thought that that declaring the obvious would, to us, be totally unnecessary, the only thing in this conversation that would make me think that this letter recommending that the city council would declare a climate emergency is that if universally every person in Kansas City already knew that. If I, thinking to everybody that I know and everybody that I personally interact with, it boggles my mind that you couldn't. But this is the city acknowledging the lived experiences of everybody who's still engaged. And I hate to say it, but Molly's freaking out. I'm freaking out. People who live with this, and Marty's requesting grief counseling groups be popped up all over the city. If we don't approach this at the level that people experience it, the core people that are engaged in this process could succumb to despair, because this is real. We're not crazy. It's going to take collective action in order to do it. The only thing my letter does, and I'm, again, happy to make edits to it, I'm happy to change some of the language. It states the fact that we are dealing with environmental collapse before our eyes. It says that we've acted too slowly for the past 40 or 50 years. And it requests a letter or a resolution declaring a state of ecological emergency. I can even change that to climate emergency for it. And then, it goes into specific recommendations. Does anybody have any edits to the letter beyond the fact that it exists?
There's a hand up.
Yeah, Molly.
I was just going to say, I'm in favor of the declaration of emergency. I think it makes sense to put it at the end of our annual report, since our annual report is going to cite the climate report. not the letter, but the request. And I really like what Jensen has found in the way of, you know, how many other cities around the world are doing this. I think we talk about in that letter, in the annual report, we talk about the impacts on Kansas City. And while, yes, the West is burning, people sitting here looking at the evening news, it doesn't register because it's not out their back door. You can certainly talk about the things that are happening out. There are things happening here. But I like Andy's suggestion and idea that this be melded into, because we do not want to distract the council with two separate asks back to back. I think we lose. The question is it more important for you to get that emotional part out, or is the goal to have an effective turn? And maybe having impact with the council is having it.
Molly,
I know you and I have gone over this over and over.
no, but also the fact that, you know, you asked to punch some serious adrenaline into the conclusion of the report.
Well, and
what could be a better exclamation point than a separate letter asking to declare a state of climate emergency? Like, have it be a separate item that, and Carolyn and I had an entirely separate conversation about this, in which I said that it's not either or, it's and because. We need to declare a state of climate emergency specifically because it's going to require an acknowledgement that, you know, if you're going to be asked to do something that's very difficult, don't do it by saying it's going to be easy. You know, don't tell me like, oh, you just need to get your PhD. I promise it's going to be a walk in the park. Everything's going to be great.
Let me interrupt a minute. I'm with Molly. I am personally not in favor of sending this separate letter to do the climate emergency. I'm not objecting to a resolution declaring a climate emergency. My expectation of that is that will be communicated to the council, and they may communicate it to the business community, but it will not translate to the kind of fundamental lifestyle changes that we need on the ground in our communities, because council saying it's an emergency is not the same as a process where people in neighborhoods relate their lifestyles to what's happening. They tell their experiences. We plan around to respond to them in the place where they are. We clearly have to change our lifestyles. It's not going to be, council isn't going to make anybody magically change their lifestyle.
No, of course not, Carol. Like, can someone please read my letter to Carol and the rest of the council? I know I wrote it, but like, why does everybody think that this letter is intentionally trying to solve the entire climate crisis? The singular goal of the letter that I drafted was to request that the city council and the mayor declare a state of ecological emergency that is real. So the fact that it's not going to change people's lifestyles, it is an alarm. There should be an alarm going off that everybody can hear, even if they don't want to hear it. That's why Molly wanted some method of doing that in the first place. And I do not agree that burying it at the end of a 5-page report with an appendix of very good things that other cities are doing is going to do that. I fundamentally do not think that there is a difference between resources and a communication of action that is and of emergency, of actual emergency. I don't see this as derailing that. I see this as helping supply energy to actually accomplish those things.
Ben, I get that point, but what I don't get still is if we submit your letter, forget everything else we've talked about, and we submit the letter and we submit it as the commission letter, and we're asking them to declare an emergency. What do you imagine the next step is once there's a one-on-one with all the council people to sell the idea, and they then pass this resolution and they now declare there's an emergency? Then what?
Then what?
What's the next day?
We would meet
for
with the
staff
city
and
council
for us?
people that would become champions. Melissa Robinson and I, we were talking about energy efficiency stuff. And to me, this is like, you know, trying to get more passive house standard buildings in the city is fantastic on an environmental justice standpoint and that kind of thing. I'm not going to belabor the story, but she said at the beginning of this meeting, thank you so much for doing this. The work that you're doing has the potential to save millions of lives. I don't agree that this is an overbearing ask. And I honestly, the fact that I'm getting this much blowback from the Environmental Management Commission blows my mind, because we are the people that are living this in the trenches. And I know for a fact that there are multiple city council people that agree with this sentiment, that want there to be a declaration of climate and ecological emergency. So what is the issue?
The issue I'm having is that it might be hollow in that there's nothing attached to it about what is the real commitment other than declaring the emergency. Normally following an emergency is a commitment of another $25 million to address the emergency and to set up new commissions and experts to manage all the information that would be required, and a global brain.
The good news is Carol already has a report and we're already working on it. Like the whole thing is the process. I'm not putting anything on the rails that are going to dislodge the process that we've already started. Okay. This is simply requesting that the city council and the mayor declare and start communicating to the entire population of the Kansas City and the region the resources that they are going to need in order to come to terms with and take action to save the planet. What that resolution has in detail, what the actual ask turns into with the resolution like they had in Chicago and Iowa City and all these other places that have already done this very obvious step, is something that we would have to work with city council to produce, but a letter requesting that they do it in the first place is just a starting point.
Well, this is the people's problem.
Yeah.
And so it seems to me, as I've worked on the Environmental Management Commission, most of the stuff is too slow and not immediate. And so I go do stuff, because I can't stand to wait. And I guess what I'm saying is, if we could engage the citizenry through this letter somehow, then, you might ask them to meet in their own groups and begin a discussion on it. And that would be the whole gist of the thing. Don't ask for more city personnel to go do something they don't have funds for, but to let, I'm not saying you said any of that, because I haven't even read the letter.
I did send it to you though.
Yeah, I got it. You got it. You sent it to me, right? And I will read it and respond to you real soon.
So I need to know, like, everybody agrees that we have a climate emergency and an ecological emergency.
Yes.
The outcome, I'm going to try to answer Bob's question one more time, is that the city council and the mayor need to understand that just as important as preparing to make these changes is communicating the importance and the dire need for them in the first place. So in the third portion of the letter, I go into suggestions for district meetings for anybody who wants to go electronically or in person so that we can have standardized communications across the city about the latest science, our current resources, and the resources that we would potentially need so that they can start engaging emotionally and practically in this process. The letter is specifically so that they can start the process of creating that resolution. It is August 11th of 2021. Even if we make a few minor changes to the letter today and agree to send it, it's going to be sent, after some edits this week. They would get it. We would start communications with city council people that could potentially be champions of a resolution of climate emergency. And then that probably wouldn't happen until September of 2021. And what the IPCC report said is that every single passing day that action isn't taken and that we don't actively transform our communities, it becomes harder and harder to prevent ridiculous calamity. So I would like to make any potential edits to the letter today and agree to send it to City Council, because I do not believe that we have a single day left.
Okay, and I will say my 2 cents, and my 2 cents is I don't think that sending this letter to council in its current form, it acknowledges that there's an emergency. It takes no real action. And so if we want to communicate to council that there's an emergency, I think there's an emergency. If we want council to formally acknowledge in a resolution that there's an emergency, there's an emergency. But I think the actions that we plan to take in response to that emergency are integral in the processes that are underway locally and regionally to do the kind of communication that you're wanting to have happen. So to my way of thinking, this letter doesn't create action. It simply, and just as a reality check, it doesn't create communication.
It actually, declaration of emergency is intended to be the most intense communication that you can give to a population. How could you possibly say that it doesn't create communication?
The passing a council resolution will not translate to community understanding that there is a emergency.
Carol, do you think that the city council couldn't create district meetings? Do you think that they could not form some kind of communication plan to declare this state of emergency to the population?
Ben, that's what they're doing in the climate resiliency planning process, is they are getting ready to communicate with people on the ground and talk to them about their experience and the changes that are needed.
No, I respectfully disagree. I think that quietly walking up to a few people and saying, I think that all of that is very, very important, but I think that you are erasing the need for one by the existence of the other. Preparing and using soft tones about potential solutions that we could have with a tiny fraction of the population is very, very, very different than taking a foghorn and telling everybody, regardless of whether or not they're listening or they're not, crisis is happening. We need to get together. We need to pull together as a community. America and the United States and the Midwest is no exception to this, is one of the most individualistic societies that exists on the planet. unless we can figure out a way to come together to make collective action, to make these transformative changes, nothing's going to happen. I can guarantee you that right now. What
Ben,
I am asking is that we request a different level of communication, and for you to tell me that it does not request anything at all and that it is a nothing request is insulting.
So
There's
Ben,
a
I
couple
think
other people.
Mike Kelly's been trying to offer something for some time. Could we let him share his thoughts? We'll come back to your concern and what you're feeling is an insult, but let's hear the others who may have some opinions here. Mike, was I right? Do I see your hand raised?
Well, there's Carl Stafford.
Oh, Carl. Okay, maybe it was you.
Yes, thank you.
The light's behind my computer and I can't see the screen. Sorry.
It's not a problem. This I see as an opportunity. And so if it's presented as an opportunity, the buy-in can come in. Alaska gives its residents stipends because of oil money. Oil is an asset. Nature is our asset. So if we start seeing nature and tell citizens nature is our asset, and let us show you how we can start benefiting from these assets, resulting in checks coming into your house, resulting in lower water bills, that's the buy-in from the masses. Like white flight, red lighting, nobody wrote a letter to the council and said, hey, let's do white flight, red lighting. Enough noise about it and enough passionate people got behind it to make it happen. So this is an opportunity. Yes, we're in an emergency, but everybody, like when you say an emergency, there's victims. And then it's like the heroes come in and save the day. Well, in this situation, we are the victim and the hero. And so here goes the blueprint to get up out of this. But the incentive to get us up out of this is the fact that we're going to benefit financially from this. So as a Black man coming in this environment, it all sounds almost aristocratic. So it's not interesting to me. But when you educate me on the benefits and how I can profit from this and then also make change, you got me interested. I'm the president of my neighborhood association. I would go into every neighborhood, every resident, and be like, dude, we can get income. Let's put 4 rain barrels on our houses, cisterns in our backyard, compost, buffalo grass. So present it like that.
I could not agree more. I could not agree more. That is, it's part of the process, and getting people excited about green jobs and the democratization of resources and the leveling out of the playing field that's going to be required for all of this stuff is a huge opportunity. I could not agree with you more. But we're trying to wrap up a conversation about requesting that the city council declare a state of ecological emergency. So, you know, that's great input. It just doesn't kind of bear into what we're talking about right now. Does anybody else have anything to add?
Just to state this here, am I allowed to speak as a member of the public?
Yes.
Yeah.
Dave.
Oh, okay. I think, I think Ben is absolutely right on in the fact that in the declaring of a climate emergency by the city council, the fact that that declaration could be made is psychologically important. It's important. It's extremely important in the sphere of public communication. The insistence on linking that statement with concrete action is erroneous in making that link. The important thing and the important thing is to make the declaration. I think I would say that Ben wants to go too far in setting up listening sessions as part of the resolution. I would just declaration of the climate emergency is the main thing. Although actually, if you're talking about the ecological emergency, I would definitely go with that. But the importance of making that declaration is it is a statement by a major city in the heartland of America that affirming that we are in deep trouble. I mean, and that's it. And you know the fact that that would have very large significance, and it would spark all sorts of coverage and conversation just by that very statement alone. And the concrete actions are coming through the Climate Action Kansas City and MARC regional plan, and the regional planning, this current climate protection plan by the city. So those are the concrete actions. So I don't see any problem with making a declaration of emergency. I don't see any problem with that. In fact, I think it's I agree with Ben that it's fundamentally necessary.
There's another hand up. RG.
Robin.
Hi, thanks. I think I agree with Ben because I think what Ben's trying to get at is that we're not hearing this from leadership, and that it makes a huge difference to have this, have our leadership shouting this from the rooftops too, in addition to the roots work that's going on, and the climate justice work. So I urge you guys to approve the letter, and I would love to work with you all on maybe part of a resolution that could come after that, and so maybe the council could declare the emergency and say, and we'll be coming back with a resolution with some concrete actions that can be taken now, and don't need to wait for 7 months.
Thank you, Robin and David. Okay, so do we still have a quorum? And does anybody have any other? I was planning on taking out the all caps, but does anybody else have any edits to the letter?
I haven't seen it, and I really would like to see it. And I don't have time to read it right now, but I don't know.
Marty, I emailed it to you.
Yeah, but I'll have to stop and read it. By that time, everybody will go home.
Right.
Or shut off. So I'm wanting it to work.
Right.
So if it had to be edited some and still go out and say, it could be, we are in a climate emergency. Please encourage the citizenry to act accordingly. I don't know, just something. It doesn't even need to be very long. It doesn't need to have all the reasons why we're in it.
Yeah.
People either know that or they don't, and we can, but it could be a paragraph. It could be a damn paragraph that would go straight to the bone.
So let me what I'm hearing here, and this kills me to lose 2 months on something like this, because I think that quite apart from Carol's sentiment that communications of this sort are totally useless, I do think that psychologically, to echo what Dave said, one, for the people that are experiencing the trauma of climate change now, two, for the people that are kind of engaged but need to be more activated, and three, for the people that are not engaged at all. Losing 2 months would be 2 months more that they would not have the opportunity to.
Well, is there a
really
way
plug
that we
in.
could? Is there a way that we could reach some kind of forum, a separate meeting or something? I'd be happy to be part of it in 2 or 3 days. I mean, I don't know if that's possible.
So the typical rules, I will have to confer with our attorney, but generally speaking, If you meet with fewer than quorum, that is fine. But when you have multiple meetings where you would surpass quorum, then you shouldn't be doing that. So that's kind of the guideline that's used.
Well, but is there public notice then if there was a meeting?
That's what happens is when you get to that point where it's quorum, there should be public notice, and you do it like this.
And how
So-
long does that period?
Right.
What do you mean? What long is that
How
period?
long before we could do the meeting if we notified people?
Well, I mean, we just need 24 hours in advance to get it to the clerk's office to do it.
Oh, well, that
So
doesn't sound.
Andy, what I think he's asking is that, so could we have a special session of the EMC in a week or two with quorum where we could talk about this specifically?
Of course.
Okay.
I'm in.
All right, Marty's in. Molly?
Yeah, I mean, I'm into looking at it again. I think it should just be so short and just to the point. We don't need all the emotion. The emotion is already there. And I know
Right.
that you feel very strongly about that part of it, Ben. I think we just make the ask. And
I would be happy with that. And I would encourage everybody to read the Chicago Declaration of Emergency, because I feel like they did a really, really good job
Send it to me.
of having all of the the factors and the building blocks of why this emergency is real lead up to the be it resolved and the action that they took after that. I don't think
Can I
that
just
this is,
interject real quick
Yeah.
for time purposes and my staff time to get to where we need to get to? I think we need a motion from the commission if you want to have another meeting.
Sure.
To do that, vote on that so that we can begin our planning process to set up a commission meeting if that is what the commission chooses to do.
Great. I would move that we have a meeting in 2 weeks to discuss the draft letter for a declaration of ecological emergency.
I would like to amend that motion that we actually look at resolutions at that point as well. So that we kind of look at what other cities have done and
Sure.
we base it on something that we build on what has already happened other places.
So
And
I agree.
we can share more for you. We got a handful more we can share.
Okay, Bob?
Wait,
Yeah, I agree with that. You took the words right out of my mouth. I think it would be really helpful. Ben, you talked about how good Chicago's was, and you mentioned Iowa City. I'd love to see those. And then I would like to ask the folks in Chicago and Iowa City, how did it go? What would you do differently if you started over today?
Sure.
I think that would be really informative for us as we decide on what we're actually going to send.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Andy,
I
can that
agree
be
with
done?
you,
Is
Bob.
that something you can get together for us?
Well, we can certainly get the resolutions together. We already have 7 of those lined up.
Okay.
If you're asking for us to follow up with other cities, we can start that. I don't know how far we would get, but we can certainly start with Chicago
Well, if
and
we
work
could
from
make
there.
a few calls to the most obvious ones and see
Yeah.
if they could give us some idea of what transpired and would they change it and so on. It feels to me like that would really inform our
Okay. Yeah,
action.
we'll put some staff time into that. I'm not making promises how far we'll get, but 2 weeks is
Yeah.
kind of short, but with
Yeah.
summer and all, so we'll do our best.
Okay. Do I need a second for the motion?
I second
You
it.
did. Okay, let's go ahead and see. Let's let's raise your hand if you think you can attend. So let's not just say that we are going to have a meeting, but would you come? Would you participate? Because if we don't have a quorum that can participate, that's kind of an issue too.
Well, and Carol, what we've done with the steering committee is we can send out a poll to all of the commissioners. And, you give me 2 or 3 dates that Ben, you and Bob maybe are available. And then we send it out to the whole commission to vote. And we
Right.
go with the one with the most number of folks.
That's a good idea. That's a
Okay,
good
so
idea.
we can send that out tomorrow.
Well,
And we're
in that
looking-
case, if we don't have a quorum, it will end up being, we'll go with that.
Yeah, okay. But we can get that
Cause
pulled out tomorrow.
yeah, okay.
So you want
Okay.
in 2 weeks, right?
Yes.
I suppose we're
that would
looking
be-
at 2 weeks-ish, depending on availability. So I guess we are pretty much going to dispense with the rest of the agenda. I wanted to mention one thing that's on old business, just so you are all informed. The EV policy that we looked at last month was considerably less robust in its final version. And so we didn't send a letter endorsing it like we anticipated we would. I think we may want to revise the letter and send a more aspirational letter about electronic vehicles in the city fleet in response to the sort of, how would I say, not as robust administrative regulation that was actually promulgated. Does that everybody understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we will still support electrification of the city's vehicle fleet, but the letter will not be specific to support of the administrative regulation as it was promulgated. Okay?
Mhm.
Yep.
All right.
Sorry for taking everybedy's time and
Thank you,
being so
Ben.
passionate about this stuff, guys. It's
Thank you,
it
Ben.
just kills me to interact in day-to-day life with all this stuff happening as if nothing's happening.
I've been doing it for 40 years.
Yeah. Barney, you're my hero. You always are.
You gotta start growing that beard, Ben.
I'm trying. I've been trying it for years, unbeknownst to you, Molly.
Okay.
You got a ways until you look like our sage Marty.
Oh,
Are you all ready to say goodbye?
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Call me.
Thanks, gang.
Thank you, Ben.